Welcome everybody to this EPRA webinar on the value of listed real estate, 2024 performance, updates and trends. My name is Matt Fletcher. I'm Director of Investor Outreach. The purpose of the webinar today is a brief update on EPRA and our resources, specifically aimed at non-member investors. Please don't worry about making notes. We'll send through the presentation after this call. You should be aware that the reports and databases that will be shown are only available to EPRA members. And after my introduction and explanation of investor outreach, we'll move on to index and index reporting, financial best practices and sustainability best practices, online resources, and then there'll be time for Q&A. And on the next slide, you'll see that the broad mission that EPRA has is to promote, develop and represent the European listed real estate sector. And when you look at the membership, you'll see that we have 65% membership of listed real estate companies, mainly European, a total number of 287 members. Interestingly, 35% of the membership are investors and sector participants. And the purpose of this webinar is to give you an insight into how we can best serve the cohort. So what does EPRA do and how does it do it? On the left-hand side, you'll see the main focus areas that we have. Public affairs, talking to the EU and also the national associations within real estate, research and indexes, events and networking, investor outreach, reporting and accounting, including sustainability. So we have a team of 18 full-time staff based in Brussels, and the main undertakings are those that you see on screen. And on the next slide, what you'll see is essentially an overview of our main events for the year ahead. There are also plenty of other webinars and other events that take place throughout the year, but we wanted to give you a highlight of the main activities. Our annual conference, which is highlighted in bold, the 16th to the 18th of September next year, will be held in Stockholm. The 16th of September is a property tour day in the local area of Stockholm. The 17th of September is the broad, proper, understood conference day. And then on the 18th of September, we have Investors Day, which is a particular day for over 30 companies to meet investors within group meetings and a one-on-one format. Next year in Stockholm, we will be open to having investors come to the whole conference. So through the property tours, the conference day proper and Investors Day. If we look briefly at the other events that you see on screen, our Insight events in January are an overview and a kickstart to the year, informal settings and networking after a panel session. You see the Finance Summit in April 2025 in London. Corporate Access is an opportunity again for investors and companies to meet in group meetings in London, in Chelsea on the 5th of June. Asia Week will take place later in summer 25, and we'll have companies going out to Asian investors. And finally, we've noted the Sustainability Summit, which is November 2025. On the next slide, we'll move on to some of our interesting podcasts that we produce that are widely distributed beyond the EPRA membership. And we will also then look at a recent report we've created to promote the sector through investor intentions. So what you see on screen are testimonials, and these promote the sector through examples of large investor actual allocations. These are the largest investors, pension schemes and sovereign wealth funds that explain the reasons why they incorporate listed real estate in their real estate strategy. You're able to look at those videos online. They're a few minutes and they're well worth understanding how and why the largest allocators use listed real estate. Our Mythbusters are interviews with specialist listed real estate investors, those, for example, named on screen, where they explain their views on specific subjects within the listed real estate sector. Of course, if you have an interesting idea, we're very happy to take them on board. And finally, what you'll see on the next slide from me is a recent survey we published on investor intentions. So the purpose of this survey is to offer information to all our members and to enable conversation with our non-members. We've already found that companies find the results valuable, and we are able to discuss those findings with generalists and specialists. And we intend to produce a report like this every few years, and it would be great if you were involved in the next survey so we can track sentiment. I'll now hand over to David Moreno, Index's manager, who will briefly run through the FTSE EPRA Nareit Index series. David, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Now it's time for us to go through the indexes, and first of all, to start with the in all the presentation around the size of the global real estate industry. So first of all, just to mention that the FTSE EPRA Nareit Index has around 3.1 trillion on full market cap around the world. This information is coming from our TMT report that is available on our website, as we will see later. This is an estimation on the size of the listed real estate industry by regions, by countries. In the report, you will see a very comprehensive list of each single country in developed and emerging countries, markets, where you can see the size of the commercial real estate, the estimated size, the listed real estate, the economy, and a comparison with the equity market. So here we can see roughly that in Europe, in developed Europe, the size of the industry is around 442 billion euros, where roughly 60% of the market is represented by non-REITs and around 40% is the REITs market. On the next slide, we can see the composition of the FTSE EPRA Nareit Global Index Series. This is a partnership between FTSE Russell, that is the main administrator, together with EPRA and Nareit, and it's an index covering both emerging and developed markets. So this comes from a universe of potential eligible companies that count for more than 8,000 companies around the world. And at the end, the index counts currently with 491 constituents, representing 1.8 trillion in free float market cap for both global developed and emerging markets. As you can see on the left bottom corner, we have the developed EMEA region, where the developed Europe index is included, where we come with 107 constituents and 224 billion in free float market cap. On the next slide, you can see the composition and performance on the the rules governing the index series. So why this index series is different? The main point is that here we have not only a quantitative criteria for identifying the companies that are large enough to be included in the index, but also we have a qualitative criteria where both EPRA and Nareit are focused on checking the annual reports of every single constituent and potential constituent, and we identify the main business structure of each company. So basically, we compute some important ratios like the EBITDA. We compute the total EBITDA from real estate activities, and we verify that at least 75% of the company's EBITDA is derived from real estate activities, together with the liquidity and free float market cap criteria, where basically we guarantee that the companies are investable, and the other criteria that guarantee that the companies are listed in an eligible market that has full transparency and liquidity for the investors. On the next slide, we can see the performance. So all these figures are coming from two of our monthly reports. You can easily find them on our website, the monthly market review and the monthly statistical bulletin. Here we have the comparison in terms of total return in euros for different regions of listed real estate, where the performance for November 24 was 1.2% return during the month in Europe. That was outperforming the general equity market in Europe, and year to date the performance is around 2.1%. Unfortunately, we have some uncertainty on the political and fiscal side in some of the most important countries like France, the UK, even in the US that was transferred to Europe as well. But because the second quarter of the year was quite positive, and now the numbers remain almost flat in terms of performance. During the month of November, the best performing sector was lodging and resorts with 4.6% on return. And the worst sector in terms of performance was self-storage with minus 6.9%. So as you can see, we have returns, we have volatility, correlations, dividend yields. All this information is available on our reports that are easily accessible on our website. On the next slide, we can see the premium or discount against NAV in Europe, where the average discount to NAV for the continent is minus 24%, being Italy the country that with the largest discount, minus 71%, and Sweden, the country with the actually at a premium 0.04%, pretty much flat. Right now, most of the countries are slightly close to the 5 years average, but most of them still represent a very good opportunities for investors since the discount to NAV for most of the countries is still significant. On the next slide, we can see the LTV monitor figures coming from this monthly report, where basically the LTV for Europe it's around 39%. Of course, it's an average where some countries have lower and some others have higher LTV compared to the average. But here, what it's important to mention is that in terms of capital raisings, this has been quite a good year in Europe, where until November we accumulate 22.6 billions on capital raisings, mostly through the debt markets. That it's almost the same amount that combining 22 and 23 figures. And of course, this shows a strong support from many investors by providing capital to the companies that are mainly focusing now on new investment projects, and some of them also managing the debt structure for some maturities that are going to be present in 2025 and 2026. So this was just a short summary of some of the metrics and some of the figures that we have available on our reports. Later on, we will see how to find these reports on our website. But I think for now, it was just a short summary that you can see what is available and how to access it. With this, I will hand over this information to Hassan to continue with the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be going through the EPRA best practice recommendations and the sustainability best practice recommendations and the related databases. On the next slide, it's an overview of the EPRA best practice recommendations. The BPRs are non-GAAP financial disclosures that aim at enhancing transparency and comparability within the European listed real estate sector. The baseline of all these BPRs is IFRS, so company reporting, which is based on IFRS. Companies are then encouraged to report these KPIs for comparability and transparency across the sector. The current set of BPRs, as mentioned on the screen, are EPRA earnings, EPRA NAVs, which include NRV, NTA, and NDV, EPRA net initial yield and its variation topped-up net initial yield, EPRA LTV, which is a key shareholder gearing metric, EPRA cost ratios, EPRA vacancy rate, EPRA like-for-like rental growth, and EPRA capex. Just to give a bit of background, these metrics, the non-GAAP reporting metrics, have been devised by the sector based on discussions between investors, property companies, Big Four, etc. And they've evolved over 20 years or so, first metric being introduced back in 2001. What we feel is a interesting offering for investors is the database that we compile based on company's disclosure. So on the next slide, it's a brief overview of the database, which has the 6 BPRs and their variations, which you can see on screen. The database covers all members from full year 2011, and also contains historical data from unsubscribed members. The scope covers 246 companies, out of which 178 are current EPRA members. The data is collected based on the latest annual reports, and the database is in the form of Excel file. So EPRA members can download the Excel file and they can analyze as and how needed. The reporting and the access to the database, we have the feedback we received from the market is that it's very valuable. It provides comparison on different REITs, non-REITs, non-financial disclosure, and it allows both these analysts and the investor market a good data tool. The data is also actually available on the Bloomberg terminal, but over here, of course, if your firm doesn't subscribe to Bloomberg, you can access the data through the EPRA website. Moving on to the next slide, I would just like to briefly mention on the EPRA sustainability best practice recommendations. So similarly with the financial best practice recommendation, EPRA also provides guidance to the market on sustainability KPI reporting. The sustainability best practice recommendation guidelines are loosely based on the Global Reporting Initiative and were introduced in 2011. The aim again was to encourage adoption of best practices in sustainability reporting and providing companies an opportunity to report comparable sustainability KPIs. We all are aware that the sustainability reporting landscape is changing considerably with the CSRD coming into play in the EU and the ISSB otherwise globally. However, from a sector-specific part, we believe EPRA's BPRs are still very relevant, and this will evolve as the reporting landscape globally and in Europe evolves. Similarly, with the EPRA BPR database, we collect the data, SBPR data reported by companies, which currently is 120. The threshold for collecting this data are companies which make it to the EPRA SBPR survey. The database contains ESG indicators or environment, social, and governance. Regarding the granularity, the data is available on a portfolio level and also by sector. The data, again, is collected from companies' most recent annual or sustainability reports. The coverage is 13 years and the geographic coverage is 19 years. And lastly, the data is available exclusively to EPRA members. On the next slide, I also wanted to mention something which is of quite interest to our stakeholders. It's our monthly newsletter called the EPRA ESG Pulse. The target audience is, of course, sustainability leads in real estate companies, but also other stakeholders like investors, analysts, etc. The newsletter goes out to 240 contacts every month. It's delivered via email. And the theme of coverage is on policy and regulations, collaborative efforts in the sector with bodies like CREM, RICS, ULI, etc. We also talk about stakeholder engagements and mention upcoming industry events as well. Moving on to the next slide, I believe what's also of interest to potential and existing EPRA members is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. This is one of the key regulation which has been introduced in Europe, which has the objective of attracting private funding to facilitate Europe's transition to net zero economy. There has been recent development on the SFDR. As of May, the European Commission published a summary report on the latest SFDR consultation, highlighting trends and responses from various stakeholders. In June this year, the European Supervisory Authority released an opinion on the SFDR assessment, calling for a coherent sustainable finance framework that supports both the green transition and enhanced consumer protection. The key elements of SFDR, just to summarize, are disclosure requirements, transparency in reporting, investor expectations, and risk management. So as mentioned, SFDR is an important legislation for our investor members. And on the next slide, I would just like to showcase how EPRA has been supporting our investor membership in engaging on this quite important topic. So EPRA had constituted an SFDR working group, which includes investors and also other stakeholders. And the idea of this working group was to address challenges that the SFDR brings in relation to the real estate market. The group has worked on developing policy recommendations and supporting the financing of listed real estate sector's transition to net zero, while ensuring that the sector is SFDR compliant. So some of the activities that the group had undertaken is related to policy advocacy, identified inefficiencies in the SFDR framework and proposed sector-specific recommendations to address them. The group also provided legislative input where recommendations were presented to ESMA and the European Commission to simplify the SFDR framework, advocating for uniform ESG disclosure standards and recognition of listed real estate specific sustainable investments under the EU taxonomy. And lastly, the group also achieved stakeholder engagement, which involved semi-annual meetings, coalition building, and preparing advocacy materials. So this is just to showcase that EPRA is a robust platform for both REITs, property companies, but also investors to engage with policymakers on important legislative pieces. These are all initiatives related to finance and sustainability, which we believe are important to investor members. We do, of course, are involved in a lot of other initiatives as well, which help the real estate and property companies. If you would like to get more information or if you have any questions related to what I've presented today, please do get in touch and we'll be very happy to respond to your queries. Thank you. And now I will pass on the stage to Barney Coleman, who will talk about the online resources for members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan. If we may have the next slide, please. We'll look very, very quickly at the online resources that we have to offer. If you would like to receive a more detailed or in-person walk through the website and the various databases, then please get in touch at info@epra.com. That's info@epra.com, and we'll be happy to arrange a bespoke tour for you. So here we have the various data outputs that we have on offer. And we'll look at the website in a minute, which just gives you basically spot, index, and constituent data, but spanning the entire history since inception of the index. We'll then also briefly look at some PDFs and Excels that we post to the website, which David mentioned earlier. I'll then give you a very quick tour of an interactive database where we could look at a couple of companies' NAVs, for example, and explain to you how we tailor those for you. And then finally, we also have an open API that our tech team and your tech team can work on to allow you to pull data direct from our database into your database or models. So with that, let's just quickly go online and have a look. So here we have the index data, and that's found under indexes, index data. And here you can create your own personalized list of every index in the FTSE EPRA REIT series. You can pull down the underlying constituent data, and you can go back at any trading day since inception to get that data. So as I said, the data on the website is very much spot data. It doesn't give lots of history. We'll get onto that in a minute. We have a very similar layout for the constituents here. And again, this is personalized to you as an individual and gives you trading data, which, as I said, you can pull down in Excel anytime you want. We then have similar tabs here, which I won't go through in the interest of time, but in the historical zips, the entire history of the index, which you can pull down in very large zips. They're updated on a daily basis and gives all the indexes and all the currencies and all the various returns. Just moving on, looking at some of the reports that David mentioned, we have the monthly reports tab here, which gives you access to the monthly statistical bulletin, which is a 400-page report detailing the history of all the indices and underlying constituents in the series. We also have an LTV and an NAV bulletin every month. They're available in Excel and PDF format. and they give the history of all the index constituents in Europe with their NAV and LTV histories. We also have a research tab here, which looks at the various market research and academic research that EPRA produces, and the total market table here, which David alluded to, giving an overview of global commercial real estate, and then breaking out the listed element within it. Hassan mentioned the financial database, giving the history of all the EPRA BPRs, and that can be found online on the website under the finance section. And then he also mentioned the sustainability database, which again is under sustainability, and that allows you to access the database online for all the companies who produce EPRA SBPRs and for the entire history. I won't run through this again in the interest of time. And then finally, we have an online tool where we build bespoke reports for you. And here we just have an example of one looking at a company's NAV since it joined the index. We can change the timeline and go further back for other companies. We can change the company very quickly. So if we go to another index constituent, for example, it very quickly updates. You can see we're now looking at Aroundtown, and we can pull this data down into Excel, and then you can build it into your own models and do as you wish. And this is just a clear example. I'm just using NAV. We could be looking at EPS, we could be looking at LTV, we could be looking at any of the EPRA data that we have. So I hope that was useful. Just remind you that we also have the API. So if you have in-house techs, you could build an API to all of this data and just pull it on a daily basis into your own databases. And again, if you would like a more detailed overview of this or a trial, please get in contact with us at info@epra.com, and we'll be happy to give you a more detailed overview. So with that, I'd like to ask if there are any questions. I don't think we have any at the moment. Okay, then I think it just leaves me to recap, to thank my colleagues and thank you for attending this webinar. Final reminder, info@epra.com for any more information and to have a tailored walkthrough of the website and other data sources. And just a reminder, we will be circulating these slides to all attendees post the event. So thank you very much for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our events in the very near future. Thank you.